Lawrence, so who are you, and what makes you qualified to speak about this?
Excellent question. So, my name is Lawrence Lanoff. I am a teacher, a filmmaker, a meditation explorer, an explorer of consciousness in the brain, and I have been involved in sexuality since a very, very young age. My first true teaching with a sexual master came when I was 11 years old. And he was quite an interesting character. This guy was the kind of guy who tells you, he came to me and he said, okay, look, here's the situation. You are going to have to learn how to control your orgasm. And I was like, I'm 11. And so, I'm an 11-year-old and I'm like, I don't even know what an orgasm is. But it was an interesting thing because it began to frame for me the possibility of what it meant to take something that I hear a lot of people talk about, I've heard all kinds of stories about, but to actually take something like that and give me an energetic blueprint, in essence. So at a very early age, I began studying and practicing these sort of energetic rituals before I even knew what sexuality and orgasm per se was. So that embarked me on this path of growing up in New York City in the 70s, basically 70s and 80s, and coming into my sexual prime in the 80s, and really having a very unusual and broad experience of sexuality and open-minded ideas and far-reaching principles regarding the exploration of sex and energy.
So what is energetic sex? Kind of just go like energetic sex 101.
Okay, great question. So, and what exactly is energetic sex? My short skinny of energetic sex 101 is this. Basically, there's kind of an infinite array of sexual experiences. And when you look at the amount of people on the planet, you have close to 7 billion people. Clearly, people are having a myriad of experiences. However, culturally, because of religion, our belief systems, our structures, our mythologies around sexuality, what tends to happen is that people get limited into this like little, very narrow experience of what sexuality is. And so most people, their experience of sexuality is like kind of about the size of like a straw. And if you would imagine like trying to run uphill and sucking air through a straw, it's a very difficult situation. And so our culture is really adrift in this sea of confusing ideas and ideals regarding human sexuality. So what energetic sex is in my experience, for me, it is the opening up of that straw and teaching people that, in fact, you don't have to breathe and think through a straw, but you can begin to experience sexuality in this vast ocean of human experience that it really is. And that's kind of the process that I've been exploring, is this opening of this window, the doors of sexual perception. And that opening of the door begins this realm of what I call energetic sexuality. Now, energetic sexuality is basically anything other than the slopping together of these cells with those cells, right? So it's not that there isn't energy involved in that. Of course there is, but we're so, I want to say, acculturated and accustomed to what that means that the slapping of flesh is what most people define as sexuality. So energetic sexuality is the opening of the perception of understanding that there is something else going on, whatever we want to call that, and beginning to tune your psyche, your being, your brain, your mind, your central nervous system to this other level of subtle energy, this other thing that is happening. Now, whatever that is, and I don't know that we actually really know what that is yet, but whatever that is, is really an incredible window to start to spread open and go, something's going on here. And what's so cool about that is that when somebody has that first experience, which is my favorite thing, like when they've been going through sexuality, like, hello, this is my sexual experience, and then all of a sudden you give them, they have this experience of like, what? There's this other realm where you can have orgasm in your body in an instant, where you can go from 0 to 60, where you don't even need another person. This is the beginning of the opening of the door of what energetic sexuality is.
That was awesome. Yeah. Good job. Can you describe for us some ways of experiencing energy?
Yeah, for me, energy is anything that, it's any experience where you are taking the emphasis off of the gross physical senses. Okay, so in other words, if you imagine sort of a scope of energy like color, okay, we have ultraviolets to the infrareds when it comes to color. And when it comes to the experience of energy and practicing energy, it's understanding that most of our perception of sensation is within the 5 senses at a very specific level or threshold. So most people, when they leave that threshold, they experience that as discomfort, right? So a lot of people find themselves in this box of sensation, let's say, right? Where they're sitting in this box, and they're, it's kind of like, well, this is my world, and I'm comfortable from, 30 degrees to 80 degrees, and over here I'm not so comfortable. Well, discovering energy, what that is, and practices to discover that, are discovering this, is beginning to open up this range and saying, okay, well, what if it was 80 degrees, but I was having one of the most erotic experiences of my life? What if I'm starting to add these additional experiences or sensations or thoughts or beliefs or transformations that begin to take me from this kind of fairly condensed box of comfort zone, expanding beyond that and expanding ultimately our ideas of pleasure or bliss or what our potential is to feel. And my experience is, when I'm teaching people to practice these kind of more different ways, more diverse ways of experiencing energy, it's simply starting, number one, to move out of the comfort zone. Because the comfort zone is like our prison. And so you can't really begin to experience some of the things that we were talking about on this video that we've been teaching and speaking about. You can't really experience them if you're within your comfort zone. By definition, to even engage in the question, you have to expand outside of your comfort zone. So if, for example, you were to get into bed with your partner tonight and you notice that there's a pattern to the sexuality, there's a pattern to the approach, there's a pattern to your breath, there's the way you do it, there's a time frame. Well, what happens if I interrupt that pattern? What happens if I change that pattern in some way? What happens if I go left instead of right? What happens if I begin to expand outside of my comfort zone, which really this is what this whole practice is about, one way or another. We're talking about moving beyond our safe comfort zone and trying something completely different, and getting comfortable with looking foolish or making mistakes. Yeah.
I'd like you to take over. I'm going to tap into what's straight.
Cool.
Okay. Can you speak a little bit about energetic orgasms?
Okay, energetic orgasms, I can speak about it, far better to experience it, and we're going to be demonstrating some of those techniques. But the short skinny of it is, an energetic orgasm is sort of the orgasm of the body or the being. Whereas most orgasm is experienced as, let's say, a focused point, whether it's a G-spot or deep spot or clitoral or pelvic, or, there's like an isolated area. The energetic orgasm is kind of taking of the focused point of energy and beginning to expand that in the entire body. So it's like, it's actually even beyond the body. It's like the process of discovering what an energetic orgasm is like when the body begins to disappear and there is this sense of unity that happens. And that sense of unity, whether it's unity with another person or unity with yourself or unity with a mountain or another being or an animal or a plant or something where your normal sense of self and identity is transcendent and something else, something really good and delicious and wonderful and outside of the norm of your experience happens. So to me, the experience of energetic sex is essentially entering the space of the mythological space of transcendent sex. And so energetic sexuality is moving from sort of mundane everyday consciousness into the realm of this more transcendent space.
Do you have to be spiritual or have a spiritual practice in order to experience energetic sex or orgasms?
You know, you absolutely don't have to have any spiritual practice at all. In fact, I would prefer if you didn't, because it's likely, to quote Carl Jung, spirituality is a protection against a spiritual experience. So a lot of times the knowledge and techniques can actually get in the way of leaving of the self, of the smaller identity, and moving into a different space. So spirituality is really irrelevant, and it can help in the process, but at some point the techniques, as we've spoken about at different times, like a few people have spoken about how like the technique can actually start to get in the way. Like I had this idea, this is the way it is or should be. And really I'm going to go back to Kinsey and say, when it comes to sexuality, there really is no norm. So what we're really talking about in this DVD is the ability to expand your sense of norm, expand your sense of identity, expand how your comfort zone regarding sexuality, and begin to move into a place that is different from your normal way of doing things. So I would say, if you didn't meditate and you didn't do all these practices, it doesn't mean you can't have it, because there are actually some people who are not able to do the practices for whatever reason. But that doesn't mean that they can't have the experience. That's what's so beautiful. In fact, there is a friend of mine who is not capable of barely, limited movement, and certainly has no access to her sort of traditional sexual resources, but has the most transcendent sexual experiences and can't do any of the practices.
Awesome. Talk a little bit about hands-off, clothes-on sex.
Hands-off, clothes-on sex is my favorite kind, actually, because in an interesting way, there's some beautiful, it keeps some great boundaries intact. So when you're dealing with hands-off, clothes-on sex, what's so beautiful about that is that it's like it's the ultimate safe for sex practice. It's like you can have this beautiful experience, but the traditional hooks that people have, where it's like, oh, well, we touched this cell to this cell, so therefore it means XYZ thing. In the realms of energetic sex, you're not really dealing with that at all. You're realizing that it's like there's something beautiful, and it can even be deeper, but it can be fully clothed. So much of the challenge that people have, the fears, them getting caught in their mind, what does this mean and what does that mean, you can obviate or get around a lot of that by just being sort of consciously moving energy, or sharing an experience. And that experience, really what we're talking about, energetic sexuality, to me, is a peak experience in the experience of being alive. And so that experience of being alive can be shared with another human being, and frankly should be shared with another human being. Not should as in like you better share this with another human being. Share it with yourself, share it with a mountain, but share it.